Thank you, Madam Chair. This bill is a bad bill. This bill is bad law, it's bad policy, and it's bad for democracy. There are serious constitutional questions in the bill. The text of the Constitution, Article 2, says each state shall appoint in such matter as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors. This bill is Congress trying to intrude on the authority of the state legislatures to do that. But it's also exceptionally bad policy. Unfortunately, I understand why Democrats in this body support it. I think there are three reasons Democrats in this body support it. Number one, this bill is all about Donald J. Trump. And nobody in our lifetimes has driven Democrats in this body more out of their mind than President Trump. We know that Democrats aren't opposed to objecting to elections and presidential electors. We know that because Democrats objected in 1969. And then they objected again in 2001, then they objected again in 2005, and then they objected again in 2017. So Democrats have a long history of going up and objecting to electors. And by the way, in two of those times, 1969 and 2005, it wasn't just a Democrat House member that objected. A Democrat senator joined in that objection and triggered the debate and vote. We also know the brazen hypocrisy that the Democratic rage at Trump has produced, where we have a kangaroo circus of a January 6th committee literally chaired by a House Democrat who made one of those objections, insisting that it is now utterly unimaginable to object to a presidential election and to the outcomes thereof. We also know that the Democrats are hell-bent on federalizing elections, and this bill takes a significant step down that road of putting the federal government in charge of elections. That has been a top Democrat priority for some time. But the biggest reason this bill is problematic is it is intended to decrease the ability of the United States Congress to address the very real problem of voter fraud. Voter fraud has been a persistent challenge in our elections from the dawn of time. Democrats used to acknowledge that. That didn't used to be a controversial statement until suddenly the 2020 election, when Democrats began clutching their pearls and insisting there is no voter fraud, it never has happened, and anyone who says it does happen is wearing a tinfoil hat and is a moonbat conspiracy theorist. That is wildly dishonest, I believe. And indeed, you can see in the Democrats' effort to pass the Corrupt Politicians Act, S1, that the Democrat Party today has made a decision that voter fraud is affirmatively in its political interest. The Corrupt Politicians Act would strike down every photo ID law in the country, despite the fact that overwhelming supermajorities of Americans support photo ID for voting. The Corrupt Politicians Act would strike down laws in states across this country prohibiting ballot harvesting, even though former Democratic President Jimmy Carter told us ballot harvesting is one of the greatest avenues for voter fraud you can have. The Corrupt Politicians Act would register millions of felons to vote and would register millions of illegal aliens to vote. And yet, unfortunately, today's Democrats have made, I think, a really cynical political decision that voter fraud, they believe, helps elect more Democrats, and so the more fraud, the better. What this bill does is decreases the ability of Congress to address instances of fraud when it occurs, and I believe Congress has a responsibility to do that. I would note that in the election of 1876, when there were serious allegations of voter fraud, Congress did not throw its hands in the air and say there's nothing we can do about it. No, Congress appointed what it called an election commission that consisted of 5 senators, 5 House members, 5 Supreme Court justices that examined the facts and evidence of voter fraud and made a determination. That incident became the predicate for what is now the Electoral Count Act. That was responding responsibly. What this bill is trying to do is take Congress out of the business of trying to correct fraud. Now, as I said, I understand why Democrats are supporting this bill. What I don't understand is why Republicans are. In the House version, Lofgren-Cheney, it did ostensibly get 9 Republican votes, all from Republicans who are either not running for re-election or who were beaten in their primaries. In other words, not a single Republican who actually is going before the voters is willing to support it. I don't believe senators from this side of the aisle should be supporting a bill that enhances the federalization of elections and reduces the ability of Congress to respond to the very serious problem of voter fraud. I think this bill does that, and so I intend to oppose it.